I used to think love meant tolerating disrespect when someone was having a bad day. Turns out, it actually means having enough self-worth to walk away when someone shows you they don't value what you bring to the table. I'm Sage, 29. Been working as an electrician in Charlotte for the past 6 years. Started right out of high school. Did my apprenticeship with this old-timer named Frank, who taught me that there's dignity in honest work. Good steady work, decent money. The kind of job that keeps you busy but lets you sleep at night knowing you helped keep people's lights on. I'd been with Bryn for 18 months, and for most of that time, things felt solid between us. We met at my friend B's barbecue, one of those late summer gatherings where nobody wants the night to end. I was manning the grill when this woman walked up and started talking to me about the electrical work I'd done on B's kitchen. "You're the guy who figured out why his outlets kept tripping, right?" she asked. "He said you saved him like $2,000 by catching something the other electrician missed." Most people's eyes glaze over when you start talking about electrical work. But Bryn seemed genuinely interested. She asked smart questions, wanted to understand how I'd diagnose the problem. That's Bryn, 26, works as a social worker downtown with at-risk kids. The kind of job that pays nothing but matters everything. She'd light up talking about her clients, these kids who'd been failed by every adult in their lives, and how she was trying to be the one person who didn't give up on them. Her passion for that work was one of the things I fell for first. Here was someone who chose a difficult job because it mattered, not because it paid well. Someone who saw value in people other people had written off. The first year was honestly incredible. We had this routine where I'd pick her up after work on Fridays, and we'd drive out to Lake Norman, just sit by the water and decompress from our weeks. She'd tell me about whatever crisis she'd helped navigate, and I'd share stories about the weird electrical problems I'd solved. "You're like a detective," she said once, after I'd explained how I'd tracked down a short circuit. "You see clues other people miss." When I told her about my plan to eventually start my own electrical contracting business, she got excited about it, started asking about timelines and what kind of work I'd specialize in. "You should do it," she said. "You're good at what you do, and you care about doing it right. That's rare." But somewhere around month 15, I started noticing cracks in how she talked to me. Nothing dramatic at first, just little comments that seemed designed to sting. It started during a particularly stressful period at her job. Budget cuts meant higher caseloads, which meant less time with each kid. She'd come home exhausted and frustrated, and I understood that. But the frustration started getting directed at me in ways that felt personal. "You're so content with mediocre," she said one evening. "Doesn't it bother you that you'll probably be doing the exact same job in 10 years? When I tried to explain that I liked my work, that there was satisfaction in being skilled at something useful, she'd give me this look like I was missing some obvious point. The comments got more frequent and more pointed. She'd mention other couples we knew where the guy had ambition, or she'd make casual observations about how I seemed comfortable with settling. "Sometimes I wonder what I'm even doing with someone who has no drive to grow," she said once after a particularly bad day. When I'd try to talk to her about how those comments felt, she'd apologize and explain that she was just stressed, that she didn't mean it the way it sounded. And because I loved her, I accepted those explanations. But here's what I started noticing. The stress excuse only applied when she was being cruel to me. When she had a bad day at work, she never took it out on her clients, never snapped at her supervisor, never said cutting things to her friends. She had perfect emotional control in every other relationship in her life. My friend Knox, who I've been rooming with since we graduated high school, started noticing changes in how I carried myself around the house. "You seem tense all the time now," he said one morning. "Everything okay with you and Bryn?" I told him it was fine, but the truth was, I'd started walking on eggshells around her, trying to anticipate what might trigger the next round of criticism. I'd started second-guessing decisions I'd never questioned before. Was I being too complacent in my career? Should I be making more money by now? Was there something fundamentally lacking in my personality that made her lose respect for me when she was upset? The fight that ended everything happened on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks ago. We'd been talking about the possibility of moving in together, and I was being practical about it, looking at places we could afford comfortably, talking about splitting expenses fairly. Bryn was frustrated that I wasn't immediately jumping at the idea of getting a bigger, more expensive place in a trendier neighborhood. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she said, her voice getting that sharp edge. You think small, Sage, about everything. Your job, your apartment, your goals, your entire approach to life. I tried to explain that I was thinking practically, that I'd rather be comfortable financially than stretch thin. That's not practical, that's fear, she shot back. You're so afraid of taking risks that you don't even try to improve your situation. The conversation spiraled from there. She brought up things I'd shared with her in confidence. My concerns about starting my own business, my worries about taking on debt, things I'd trusted her with, being used as weapons against me. You know what your problem is, she said, pacing around her living room. You don't believe you deserve anything better than what you have. You've convinced yourself that being mediocre is noble. I was sitting on her couch, watching the woman I loved tear apart everything I thought she understood about me. I've been thinking about this for months, she continued, and I need to just say it. You're not husband material, Sage. You'll never be enough for someone like me. The words hit exactly where she'd aimed them. Not husband material. Never enough. For someone like her. Those weren't words said in the heat of the moment. Those were conclusions she'd been reaching about me over time, judgments she'd been forming while I thought we were building something together. I stopped mid-sentence, grabbed my keys from her coffee table, and said, okay. That was it. No yelling, no dramatic speech, no slamming doors. Just, okay, and I walked out. I drove around Charlotte for about 2 hours, not really going anywhere, just processing what had happened. I ended up parked at Lake Norman, the same spot where we used to go on Friday evenings, trying to understand how someone who'd once said I was like a detective could now see me as fundamentally inadequate. By the time I got back to my apartment, I'd made my decision. I blocked her number, packed up the few things I had at her place, and dropped them off while she was at work the next day, left her spare key on her kitchen counter, and drove away. Knox found me that evening, sitting on our back porch with a beer. You want to talk about it? He asked. She told me I'm not husband material, I said. That I'll never be enough for someone like her. Knox was quiet for a long minute. What did you say back? Nothing. I left. Good, he said. Sometimes the only winning move is not to play. I thought that would be the end of it. Clean break. Time to move on. I was wrong about the clean part. Update 1. Bryn figured out I was serious when she came home Wednesday evening to find her spare key on her kitchen counter and the empty space where my clothes used to hang in her closet. The texting started that same night. First confused. Where did you go? We need to talk about this. Then apologetic. I didn't mean what I said. I was just frustrated. Then angry. You can't just disappear when we have a disagreement. When I didn't respond to any of it, she escalated to calling. I'd blocked her number, but she started using other phones. Work, friends, even her sister's phone to try to get through to me. When the calls didn't work, she started showing up places she knew I'd be. The coffee shop where I grab breakfast before job sites. The gym where I work out Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Even drove by job sites where I was working, waving like we were still together. The worst incident was when she cornered Danny, one of my co-workers, at the hardware store. Tell Sage I need to talk to him, she said. He's not answering his phone. There's been a misunderstanding. Danny came back to our job site shaking his head. Dude, what did you do to that girl? She looked like she hasn't slept in weeks. I felt a stab of guilt hearing that. Despite everything she'd said, I didn't want her to be suffering. But I also knew that her suffering didn't obligate me to fix it by accepting treatment I'd decided I wouldn't tolerate anymore. But here's what really became clear during those 3 weeks. I wasn't ignoring her to be cruel. I was protecting something I'd finally figured out was worth protecting, my own sense of self-respect, because the more time passed, the more clearly I could see the pattern that had been building for months. The little digs about my ambition, the constant implication that I needed to become someone different to be worthy of her. I'd been so focused on trying to prove her wrong that I'd missed the bigger question. Why was I trying to prove anything to someone who fundamentally didn't respect who I already was? My friend B put it best when we were talking about it over beers. Brother, you don't negotiate with someone about whether you're worth basic respect. Either they see your value or they don't. The crazy part was how much better I started feeling once I stopped carrying the weight of her disapproval around. I'd been walking through life slightly hunched over, trying to make myself smaller to fit into her idea of what I should be. Standing up straight again felt incredible. And other people started noticing too. This nurse at the urgent care clinic where I was doing some electrical work asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. When's the last time that had happened while I was with Bryn? I couldn't even remember. I wasn't over everything that happened. 18 months doesn't just disappear overnight, but I was starting to understand that the right person doesn't make you feel like you're constantly auditioning for the part of boyfriend. Update 2. I was at my parents' house for our usual Sunday dinner, something we've done every week since I moved back to Charlotte. My mom makes this incredible pot roast, and we just sit around the table talking about our weeks. My parents had met Bryn several times over the 18 months we were together. They'd been polite, even warm toward her, but I could tell they had some concerns. My mom had mentioned once that Bryn seemed a little sharp sometimes. We're sitting around the table when the doorbell rings. My dad goes to answer it, and I hear this voice from the foyer that makes my stomach drop. "Hi, Mr. Hartwell. Is Sage here? I really need to talk to him." Bryn, at my parents' house, on Sunday dinner, without invitation or warning. My mom and I exchange looks, and I can see her trying to figure out how to handle this. My parents believe strongly in boundaries and respect, but they're also too polite to slam the door in someone's face. My dad comes back looking uncomfortable. "Sage, Bryn's here. She says it's important." I went to the front door, where Bryn was standing on our porch looking like she'd been crying for weeks. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair looked unwashed, and she was wearing clothes that looked slept in. "I'm sorry to bother your family," she said, "but you won't answer my calls, and we really need to clear up this misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Bryn. You said what you meant." I was angry. People say things they don't mean when they're angry. That's when my mom appeared beside me. "Bryn, honey, this isn't the time or place for this conversation. Sage is having dinner with his family." "Mrs. Hartwell, I know this looks bad, but I love your son. I'm willing to work on things, to go to counseling, whatever it takes." My mom smiled that polite Southern smile that means, absolutely not. "I think you should probably head home now, dear. But I need him to understand." "Bryn," my dad said from behind us, "you need to leave. Now." After she left, we went back to dinner, but the mood had definitely shifted. Finally, my dad set down his fork and looked at me. "Son, if someone doesn't respect your boundaries when you're trying to have a peaceful dinner with your family, what does that tell you about how they'll respect your boundaries in other situations?" He was absolutely right. But the family dinner incident was just the beginning. This week, she's been waiting by my truck after work, not approaching me directly, just standing there in parking lots, like she's hoping I'll eventually cave and talk to her. Yesterday, my supervisor Frank pulled me aside. "Sage, I don't know what's going on with you and that girl, but she's been hanging around the job sites, and it's starting to make people uncomfortable. You need to handle this." The thing that really gets me is how this behavior proves exactly why I walked away in the first place. Someone who respected my decision would accept it, even if they disagreed with it. Someone who respected me as a person wouldn't show up to my family's house uninvited or make my workplace awkward. Bryn's sister Tegan texted me a few days ago. "I know it's not my place, but Bryn is really struggling. She's barely eating, crying constantly. She knows she messed up big time." I appreciated Tegan reaching out. But struggle doesn't erase disrespect. People don't get to treat you badly and then use their regret as leverage to force their way back into your life. Knox keeps reminding me, "You didn't cause this situation, brother. You just stopped accepting it." Final update: last night, Bryn showed up at my apartment at 2 a.m. I was already awake, one of those nights where sleep wouldn't come, just reading on the couch when I heard desperate pounding on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing there, clearly drunk, mascara streaked down her face, swaying slightly. I almost didn't open the door. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, but she was obviously not in good shape, and whatever else had happened between us, I couldn't handle the idea of her driving in that condition or wandering around my neighborhood at 2 a.m. "Sage," she said the moment I opened the door, "please just let me explain." She pushed past me into my living room. "I didn't mean it," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "You are husband material. You're perfect husband material. I'm so sorry I said that. I'll change. I'll work on my temper. I'll do whatever you want. I made her some coffee, partly because she clearly needed to sober up, and partly because I realized this conversation was going to happen whether I wanted it to or not. For the next hour, she talked while I listened. Really listened, maybe for the first time in months. She told me how much she missed our Friday evening drives to Lake Norman, how empty her apartment felt, how none of her friends understood why I'd left over one fight. It wasn't one fight, I finally said. It was a pattern of you treating me like I wasn't enough, like I needed to become someone different to deserve your respect. But I do respect you, she insisted. I love you. I was just scared about our future, scared that we were getting too comfortable. Bryn, when someone loves you, they don't weaponize your insecurities against you when they're angry. They don't make you feel like you're constantly falling short of their expectations. She started crying harder then, and I felt that familiar pull to comfort her, to minimize my own hurt to make her feel better. But I didn't, because I'd finally learned that my pain mattered too. I showed you who I really am when I'm angry, she said, which surprised me with its honesty. And you can't forgive that. I can forgive it, I said, but I can't unknow it, and I can't build a life with someone who sees me the way you do when your guard is down. We sat in my living room until almost 4 a.m., talking through everything. She admitted that she'd always had this fear that she was settling, that there was something better out there if she just pushed hard enough. I thought if I could make you more ambitious, more driven, then I'd feel secure that I was with someone who was constantly growing, she said. But that's not how love works, I told her. You can't love someone for who you think they could become. You have to love who they actually are. When she was sober enough to drive, I walked her to her car. I'm really sorry, Sage. You deserved better than what I gave you. Yeah, I said. I did. That was 2 weeks ago, and I haven't heard from her since. I'm seeing someone new now. Her name's Riley. She's a nurse at Presbyterian Hospital, and the first thing I noticed about her wasn't how beautiful she is, though she definitely is, but how she talks about people. There's this underlying respect in how she sees the world that I'd forgotten was possible. Riley and I met when I was doing electrical work at the hospital, updating some outdated wiring. She was working a night shift and stopped by to make sure the power interruptions weren't affecting critical equipment. You're being really careful about this, she observed, watching me test each connection multiple times. People's lives depend on this equipment, I said. I'd rather take twice as long and know it's done right. That's exactly what I want to hear from someone working on our electrical systems, she said, and the way she said it made me feel like being thorough was a virtue, not a character flaw. When I told her about what happened with Bryn, she just nodded and said, I dated someone like that once. Took me way too long to realize that someone who tears you down when they're upset doesn't actually think very highly of you. The difference between being with Riley and being with Bryn is like the difference between walking on solid ground and walking on quicksand. With Bryn, I was constantly adjusting my steps, watching for signs that I was about to sink. With Riley, I can just walk. She gets excited when I tell her about challenging electrical problems I've solved. She asks genuine questions about my projects, talks about our future like she's building something with me rather than waiting for me to become someone worth her time. I'm not going to pretend the whole thing with Bryn didn't affect me. 18 months of being told you're not enough leaves marks that don't disappear overnight. But it also taught me something valuable about what I will and won't accept in my life. My friend B was right. You don't negotiate with someone about whether you deserve basic respect. Either they see your value or they don't. And if they don't, the healthiest thing you can do is find someone who does. Bryn wanted excitement, drama, someone who would fight for her even when she was tearing them down. She wanted the intensity that comes from conflict and making up, from constantly having something to fix or improve. She got exactly what she was looking for. Plenty of excitement dealing with the consequences of her choices, all the drama of realizing she'd destroyed something good, and conflict with herself about why she'd sabotaged a stable relationship. I wanted peace, partnership, someone who chose me as I was rather than who I might become if I worked hard enough to earn their approval.